And we'll start, Janet will do the roll call.
Bailey,
Yeah.
Oh,
Bessie,
here.
Newton,
Yeah.
Ellsworth.
Here.
Here.
The others are excused.
Yes.
And I think really for this, I'm going to turn it over to Administrator Bowers.
Thanks, yeah.
Yeah.
So we have had other committees, of course, that have gone through all the details of the big packets, which are actually over there. But our committee is tasked with the finance. How, the different ways we're going to get the funds.
So there's a couple of things each subcommittee saw, that's not true. 2 out of the 3 subcommittees voted, one unanimously, 5-2, to put the items requested forward to the executive committee, as presented. One committee, we did not have a quorum, so there's no recommendation. No minutes, no nothing.
Yeah, there was criminal justice, right?
That's correct, sir. Right. So that will be presented to the executive committee in its entirety. That was a decision of the chair in consultation with the county attorney. So really your committee's understanding that all of the capital items will be reviewed by the executive committee and by the full delegation. Your committee's job is to determine the proper way for financing whatever package, if some package is approved by the full delegation, whether to pay for it cash or to bond it. I would presume with the size of the amount of money we're talking about, that certainly the recommendation could be to bond it, not to not to add it on to 1 year's tax rate. So based on that, we have consulted with our financial advisor, who suggests that the best time to do a bond is January. Every January, the bond rates tend to dip. We're looking at something, the lowest. Let me take a step backwards. We checked on several bonds that have been issued recently in our area. The lowest being 5.1 and a high, I'm sorry, 3.1.
Thank you.
3.1 and the higher being around 3.7. So we expect when we go out for public sale, in January, we're hoping for the lower end of that range. But that's the projected range. So, we have, documents, Diane's prepared documents that shows, bond payments,
Amortization.
amortization schedules showing what payments that we are due, how they will decrease after this year. So that information is available to you.
Thank you.
So we did it at 3.55. Again, that is a bid, that's gonna be a bid item. We go out for public offering. We've been fortunate that Northway Bank has shown a particular interest in this county and has given us the lowest rates. Although we don't take that for granted. But they've been showing us the lowest rates lately. The other thing that I wanted to mention is any item here that's related to the nursing home is reimbursable under our Medicaid reimbursement to its fullest amount plus interest included. So what you will see on the tail end of this page that you have in front of you, the big page, is you will see the effect of their, uh, what will be built into our reimbursement rate over the depreciation schedule that Medicaid has adopted for a specific item. Now, what you don't see here is obviously the interest, because we don't know what the interest would be, but when the interest is found out, then the interest is included in that depreciating rate.
Where is what you're just talked about? Where is that on this page?
Diane, where,
So if you're, Representative Newton, if you're looking at this large page, that column that's highlighted somewhat in pink under RRH.
Yeah, yeah.
So that would be the column for the portion that is attributed to the nursing home. So
Okay.
it totals the 4,181,000.
So to get it clear, and excuse me if I ask and you think it's not a very smart question, but so out of the 4,181,978, what are we looking at, possible reimbursement?
Well, on page 3 of the handout I just gave you, there's a depreciation schedule, and the way that it works on our Medicaid.
Okay,
cost
hold on a
report-
second, hold on a
Yeah,
second.
The third page.
Trying to look for that. The third page
Yeah.
back, okay.
There's an estimate of a depreciation schedule, as
Okay.
best as we know, right now. And it's not going to happen every year like that, because we will not have put
Yeah,
all of these items in service in the same year. So it's sort of an estimate.
Yeah.
That on our cost report, we would be able to report cost of about, a little over $300,000 each year. And so we would get that back in our Medicaid rate. And then the interest cost, now if you look at that column, the 4.1 million, it's just about, it would be probably like 22, whatever the total interest is, about 22% of that interest we could expense on our cost report as well, and it would come back in a rate, whatever is the portion of the nursing home, and we would have to allocate that
Let's
specifically.
look at a specific example, so
pick an example, Diane.
pick an example, so we can look at that and see exactly how that.
Yeah, so an example with regards to depreciation or with regards,
Reimbursement.
yeah, so I guess I'm not exactly sure what you're asking.
What,
well, let's pick a number that's easy to understand, like, so let's say, just for example, bariatric stand lift, that's 20,000, so 20,000 might be easier to understand, so
Yeah,
out of that 20,000, what would be, we could expect to have like a reimbursement?
$4,000, the $4,100, that's under the column of, and I'm sorry, I didn't explain that well enough. I look at these depreciation schedules all the time, so that column under current, which should be called current depreciation. It's those items in that line each
Okay,
year
okay, yeah.
that I can report on our Medicaid cost report, and that would come back in our rate.
so we get that amount for 5 years,
5 years.
Yeah.
Per year.
per year for
Yes.
5 years.
So how does that, if we go ahead and bond this all at once at the beginning, does that go towards the payment of the bond?
No,
That
it comes in as a
reimbursement? What is it if
revenue
we've already
Comes in
paid
as a
for it?
revenue.
to the nursing home.
Comes in as a.
It comes in as a revenue to the nursing home. It's added to our daily rate, which is how I calculate the projected Riverside rest home revenue. Every January 1st and July 1st, our rates adjusted. And that rate's adjusted based on several factors. One of the factors is how much you all appropriate when you're in the legislature. That's one of the factors. The other factor is what each nursing home has for reimbursement rate. One might ask me, why is our reimbursement rate lower than some of the other county homes? Well, it's simple. We don't really have any capital to write off. Our building's fully depreciated, so we can't write that depreciation off any longer, and therefore don't get reimbursed for it because it's fully depreciated. So in that, we have a substantial amount of leeway before we hit the maximum reimbursement rate, per year. it's like $15 and we're at like 3 and change. So we have a $12 per resident day that we could add on, which this doesn't come anywhere near that amount of money. So we're confident when we say we'd be, once the item's put in service, we'd be fully reimbursed for that item. So if we didn't do, because this is a 6-year capital plan, if we didn't do one of these items till year 3, then the reimbursement wouldn't start until year 3. It doesn't start immediately. It starts, I mean, some of these items will be done this year, we hope, because it's that critical. But some of the other items, because again, it's a 6-year plan, will be done in future years, and we obviously don't begin to get the reimbursement until the item is completed.
I want to mention, for example, one of the items we looked at this morning was potentially doing the window replacement here, right?
Well, that has,
But that's here, so
that's here, so there's nothing. to
It
do
would
with-
only be those items that,
This is
for the
only
nurse.
the items at Riverside.
Oh, okay.
So
what do you-
so one of the examples is if one of the first things we'd be doing was fixing the sewer line. And that'll certainly be done this year, presuming approval. That would be included in our this year's cost report, so we'd start getting that in our next rate adjustment, not in January, but in July.
But over the period of the term of the depreciation timeframe, we will get all our money back plus the interest.
That's correct. Plus any interest we incur.
But
For anything that's related to Riverside.
but initially we pay for it and then it shows up as a revenue.
That's correct.
Is that explained to the delegation when you say the revenues of the nursing home, this much is a reimbursement from costs we made in capital improvements? Have you ever told
We
us
always,
that before?
I always identify to the Riverside Subcommittee our rate, our reimbursement rate.
Okay.
And that rate, when it comes to us, we have to know about it 30 days prior to the start. It comes broken down into so much for administration, so much for nursing, so much for maintenance, so much for other services, and so much for capital. That's the 5 areas.
Now, one of the things he said, I mean, he says we pay for it, but we don't really pay, we bond it. So
That's
we're
correct.
paying for it over a 10-year period.
That's correct.
And we're getting our money back either over a 5-year period of time or a 10-year period of time, depending what the depreciation is.
That's correct, sir.
Just to check in, Ray, why some of us were lost is the paper clip covered up the title of the sheet.
oh,
Oh.
sorry.
If you look at the paper clip, it said Riverside Rest Home Depreciation Schedule. So we just weren't sure what we were looking at. Paper clips, so.
So now, you have some items in here that are 20-year depreciation.
Correct,
So in other words, that money will be paid back to us over a 20-year time period.
correct.
Which means that we will have paid off, those are items that we will have used taxpayers' money to pay off in the 10-year time frame, but we will continue to be reimbursed for over a 20-year time.
That's correct, sir.
Right.
Yeah.
It just depends on the life expectancy. It's really no different than than the IRS.
Well, for Medicaid, I mean, Medicaid audits our cost report. We submit our cost report and they audit that. And, the useful life really is based on, what they think our useful life is
Right.
as well. So, this is based on what Medicaid will approve for a useful life. A lot of these items will have beyond the 5 years, will have beyond the 10 years, but it's really an accounting number.
Like 11 items in well for 20 years,
Yeah,
that we will continue to receive revenue for throughout that 20-year period.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
But we'll have paid it off in 10 years.
Yes, sir.
but we may have that asset well beyond the 20 years.
Yes.
Do you want us to focus on the 10, because if we can do it, that's such a big savings compared to the 20? I mean, you gave us both.
Oh, the amortization
Yeah.
schedules?
Well, some of the things are going to be paid off in 5 years, which are good.
Well, the depreciation schedule, yeah, I mean, as far as the reimbursement for the nursing home, there are a small number, a handful of items, yeah.
Yeah, and it looks like it may balance out.
I think it's pretty close to balancing out.
Because a lot of the 20-year things, other than one, the life safety electrical, the rest of them are relatively small items.
Mhm.
And you've got some 5-year items, which are gonna be reimbursed, network storage replacement, $32,000. And, core switch replacement for, or server upgrade, $23,000, $15,000. Those are 5-year reimbursements, so we're gonna get a lot of money up front
Mhm.
on
In
those.
some areas, we'll get it up front, in some areas after the bonds retire.
Typically, when it comes to anything computer related, 5 years is what they'll give you because the technology
Right.
just changes.
But what we're looking at here, I mean, some of that stuff, core switch replacement, certainly you could have in-house for more than 5 years.
Oh, absolutely.
The
Server, maybe not, but
the presentation to the Riverside Subcommittee, and our current switches are nearly 20 years old.
right,
They're just not replaceable. We can't,
Cabletron.
yeah, it's 20, so simply because it says it's gonna we're gonna get paid at that rate, doesn't mean that we're gonna be looking in 5 years for replacement.
Yeah.
We're going to use those items until the end of their
Yeah.
useful life.
Yeah, useful life for depreciation schedule it's accounting.
Yeah.
That's, the IRS has a standard, Medicaid has a standard for the purpose of reimbursement. But that really doesn't mean that's the actual useful life that we would use the asset. Typically, we hold on to assets a lot longer than that.
Yeah.
For example, I don't know if we have, a motor vehicle is always 5 years. And we tend to keep our vehicles a lot longer than 5 years.
So it looks like within the first 10 years, the term of the bond, we will actually take in more revenue than we will end up paying
Paying out.
on this bond.
Well, I
in the
don't,
first 10 years.
for that section of Riverside.
I mean, it pretty much balances out, but we do have payments, and we're still gonna, revenue we're gonna receive after 10 years. That, will still be coming into us, but the bond will be paid off.
Mhm.
Yes.
So again, I might not phrase it right. Are you leaning one way or another? As far as the length?
Length of the bond, I think that I would check again with our financial advisor. The examples that we used, it was 0.5% more to go to 15 years.
Yeah,
And we have to figure out, if we'd have to look, our goal is to look at the market and do what's most advantageous. And let me give you an example. The items that we need to do now, the chimney that we're afraid is gonna fall in the daycare center. The sewer repair for the nursing home. I mean, those items we would like to do this year, even though we won't have presuming it's voted in. And our meeting, at the meeting in September, we would like to do those this year. So we don't have that kind of cash on hand, so we would probably do a ban till January, because we want to get the most effective rate. So we would borrow that money, not the whole amount, that money temporarily until January, then bond it and pay it back.
And so you're anticipating the full delegation meeting will be later in September.
September
After-
4th.
September 4th.
Oh, I thought that was the,
And that's both the executive committee and then the full delegation.
oh, the same day.
Same thing.
Maybe
That's what I missed.
4 o'clock for the executive
7
committee
o'clock.
meeting, 7 o'clock for the.
Oh.
So,
Gotta read more.
we would, those are just two of the items that come to mind
Good job.
as items that we would be going out to bid for immediately.
Ah, yes.
And there might be other items, but those are the two that immediately pop into my head.
And so I interrupted myself, so that will be when you have a better idea of the route you're gonna go after you get more information.
Yeah, and I wish I could tell you definitively, we had a Zoom call with bond counsel and our financial advisor just
Tuesday.
To get them, because we're trying to get the most current information. And that's their advice at this point. But like anything else, this year tends to be even more complicated because there's a presidential election. And so therefore, they both happen to be gentlemen, their collective, no, I'm sorry, our our bond council's lady, their joint recommendation is is January is always the best finance month.
Typically, there aren't as many bonds issued in January. It's a slower time of year. For some reason, the discussion I had with our financial advisor, just out there, this summer has been the busiest summer he's ever seen in terms of bond issues.
So obviously, we want to do it at the slow time for somebody that has money on hand that, wants to make sure they try and get rid of it as quickly as they can. Because every month they hold that money is a month's interest lost.
So we-
With a 10-year bond, how long do you have to stay committed to that bond before you can, let's say interest rates go way back down? How many years do you have to stay committed to that bond before you can try to renegotiate?
Right, immediately.
Yeah.
We can refinance at any time. That's the way when we put the bond out. Okay,
Our bonds are worded. that
our
way.
bonds are worded so that it can be refinanced at any time. In fact, I
That
can't
is
remember,
not what I was told from the state. The state said on a 20 years, 10 years, you can't do
No.
anything for the first 10
not
years.
the case with
You
us.
remember
You do
the
not
question
do
was
it.
asked, in the morning's meeting about whether there was any prepayment penalty, and remember, we didn't get
You
it
can't
completely clear.
prepay a bond, but you can refinance a bond, and we've done it a couple of times.
Okay.
We've
Probably-
actually
probably
done it.
saved a lot of money when
We
you did.
did.
too.
We absolutely did.
Well, that's like
And
the
we
whole board.
always,
You're absolutely right, sir.
Ray asks me the question every year, it's like, can you look at and if you look at this fourth sheet in the packet I handed out, that is actually our outstanding debt as of the end of 2023.
And what the big sheet, I mean.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And so you can see what our outstanding debt is, and our outstanding debt, if you look at the final columns under principal, it's just a little over $3.4 million. So, and if you look at our refunded bonds, and refunded means refinance bonds, those are in the first column. We'll be shedding some debt within, by next year. We will have paid off two of our bonds. I mean, we don't have a lot of long-term debt. Our debt limit for the county is $360 million. We're at 3.4 million. We're not even close.
So we're less than 1%.
We have a lot
We're
of,
just under 1% of our debt
yeah,
limit.
we have a lot of capacity there. And it's always important, to utilize like all of your funding sources to maintain your infrastructure.
But in all due respect to the state representative Newton, they might have sold their bonds and didn't put the provision in there
Right.
about being able to refinance. Or sometimes if you accept the terms, you might get a little better rate if you waive the refinance ability.
Right.
Because they might give you an extra quarter, I'm just making up a number.
No, I understand what
A
you're saying.
quarter
It's all
percent
part
or a
of doing
half percent.
business.
If you guarantee them that you're not gonna refinance the bond if the market goes down. And that's particularly the case when the market is what would be considered high. Say the market was at 7%. Again, making that number up. Somebody might say, well, we'll give it to you at 6.5, but you can't refinance.
Right. yeah.
But
What's
we
the
don't,
step?
we don't do that type of bond here. We write it when we sell it, that we can refinance it.
Are those bonds usually several pages?
Yes.
Yeah, because I'd like to see how that's worded, how you put that in there.
Sure. We'll-
I could send you a copy of the last one we did
Yeah,
for the
that'd be great.
CIP.
Yeah, just, I'm curious just to see how you,
Sure.
Now, for example, we have that first set of columns, which is our refunded bonds. That second column, those are bonds that we issued through the New Hampshire Bond Bank. And even those, the bond bank, they ended up refinancing those, and we got, we were able to get some savings off of our interest with that. So it's something, Ray calls me every year. Can you take a look at our bond schedule? What can we We do, what rate did we get? What are the rates now? We look at it every year to see if there's something.
So that's gonna be showing us the wording that you
The
use.
bonds,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you think it would be good for other committees to get it too? If it's no, I think we'd all be interested.
Pushing one button.
Yeah.
You
Why
know,
don't you send it to this committee?
Sure.
Because I think that wording we've talked about, it's good to see it in black and white.
It helps better understand.
Yeah.
Because we've got
No, I
the
agree.
obligation to try to do the best we can for
yeah,
our.
you do it.
Well,
Well, that's
especially,
why when you say that during the budget, you say, well, in revenues, you gotta understand some of this is depreciation for things we've already bought through bonding
Yeah.
and, I'm impressed with the debt ratio you have for bonding. I mean, that's incredible to be at 1% when you can be, the state does as best it can to be at 7%.
Mm.
And they say that's acceptable, so to be at 1% is really, that does speak volumes for what you guys have been able to do. I think.
So send it to all the executive committee, okay?
Okay.
okay, all right, why not? Again, like he said.
They should all have, because they're the ones who are gonna.
Happy to do it.
But are there things in here that could be considered operating expenses that you've now got into capital expenses? Like licenses, software licenses and things like that? Is there anything in here like that?
There's a couple of things in there that, it's funny to call it licenses because it's really, and actually the major can describe it better than I, because he's much more of a computer person than I am. But the licenses is actually like, and it's an operation cost. It's not actually like a physical license. So we included as part of, what this does is it sizes the purchase because it tells you how many users you're going to have. So they call that licenses. So it's not really a license like, you pay every year. It's how many users you're gonna have over a period of time.
Would it be possible to go through this list and briefly, if you could, just say, well, this one is one, this one is one?
Oh, in terms of priorities?
Are you buying a number of seats basically? And what it is that you don't have to pay for an annual, you don't pay for
Right,
renewals, you're just buying a number of seats.
we're buying a system that gives us enough seats to operate.
Yeah.
Based on the current number of operators we have.
That's standard.
Yeah.
Standard,
Yeah.
So, if it wouldn't be too hard, if you could go through, well, I see 5 what could be considered operational expenses, and if you don't have to do that necessarily today, but if you could go through that and.
Yeah, I'll have it for the executive committee.
Yeah, that'd be great, just
Yeah.
to know what the.
Remember, any single thing you have here, you can pay cash for. What we did is tried to come up with a multi-year capital plan at a rate that is, because we would likely be financing at a rate much less, well, depending on who picks the rate of inflation, what systems used to determine the rate of inflation. We basically be paying it less than the rate of inflation. The bond cost amount, and the fact that we get reimbursed for it for all of Riverside's items, puts us into a better spot.
To group them together.
Well, to group them together, also the advantage is there's a cost to issuing a bond, probably $30,000.
Yeah.
So you don't want to issue a bond every year and pay the $30,000. You want to issue one bond, and because it doesn't matter the size of the bond, it's all the same amount of work that we pay outside people to issue the bond. That's why we try and do it 6 years at a time, because that's about as far out as we can see with any kind of reliability. And also, we only have to pay the bond issue once instead of doing it every other year, and we have to pay the bond issue 3 times. So that's why we put together a 6-year capital plan.
Also, I did just pull out a copy of the bond from 2017 for the $4.1 million CIP. And actually, the wording is we do have the ability to prepay this. So we could pay that, we could have paid this off. There's language in there for that, so.
But if we,
But was it just in that one, or is that something you could think you could add to the other ones? If we bonded, say, 16 million,
I mean, we
would
have a
that
lot
be
of.
put in there too, that we could?
have latitude when we go to issue these bonds as to some of the terms that, you know, with regards
we
to.
write the terms, that's why we have bond counsel.
Yeah.
We write the terms of the public offering.
Yeah,
So it can be written in any way we choose to write it. What we,
You want some flexibility.
yeah,
You
what
know,
what
especially
we've
for longer
mostly
term
done is
instruments.
to try and give us the ability to refinance if we, you know, if we feel that it's, the market dictates that we're gonna save money. And again, we've done it. I can't remember if you were on the delegation at the time, Representative Newton, or was it that time you were out? That was, because we have to go to the delegation for that. Yeah, that's just not something, yeah, to refinance. This is not something we can do because, you know, we feel like it.
But if you come to us and say, we're going to save X amount, probably will listen.
Yeah, I would say
yeah,
that,
most likely.
I would say that you, but it is something that we can't do independently.
Right, that's a good point.
That's my point.
No, that's.
It's hard to refinance, this last bond was at 2.25%, so
So we're obviously not gonna refinance that.
I haven't seen the rates much lower than that.
Prior plan we have for us. You know, the other paperwork. Is divided into 6 years.
Yep.
The current one is not divided into 6 years.
So what
I assume we're not spending this all in the first year?
Absolutely not. We couldn't physically do it. We don't have the staff to supervise these projects all at the same time. You know, because even though these are outside vendors that are performing, 99% of this is done by outside vendors, which we would go out to bid for. We couldn't possibly supervise, you know, this amount of work with the staff we have. That's just not possible. There is one notable item that we're simply bonding to purchase, and then our staff is going to install, and that's the sewer pumps here at the courthouse. We have sewer pumps in the basement of the courthouse, and we are proposing to replace, they've been replaced once in my 38 years. And that was over 20 years ago, but we're having 5 or 6 service calls a year now. On those because they're not meant to grind items. So items that are flushed down the toilet.
It shouldn't be actually.
And, well, in some cases, we ask people not to flush these things down the toilet, but they do anyway. And when they do, they plug up the pump. We have 2 pumps. You know, one runs, and then if it's not running fast enough, the other one kicks in. If one blocks, the other one runs, and we have notification. There's a notification at dispatch, so we have 24/7 notification, and there's also notification in the maintenance shop. So those are 2 items that we're gonna actually, our own maintenance staff can install them.
That's good. But isn't there a proposal to buy a special kind of?
The new
Special
pump,
kind of grinder?
yeah, that has a
Cutter grinder.
Right.
that has a cutter grinder. Oh, I'm sorry, Doug. I should have let you answer that. I didn't even see
You
you.
answered it perfectly.
I'm sorry.
He was just seeing how far you're gonna get.
That's the
yourself
gospel.
over here.
I think he was. I think he was. Yeah, I'm sorry. I forgot you were here. I shouldn't have even answered.
Well, given that 1/6 of this is gonna be in year 6 and 1/6 in year 5, I mean, how realistic are some of these prices, given?
Well, that's why we,
Our current experience with
That's-
inflation.
that's why we put the 10% contingency on each item. You see
What an optimist.
At the bottom.
It's probably been like 20 in the last year.
it probably has.
Yeah.
But, you know, these are fairly, you know, we think the power of the bid is helpful in that way. And we have, you know, we feel reasonably good that that the 10% will carry us through. So maybe we save the first items that we're doing. We won't use the 10%. So that 10% would be available to use, a higher amount towards the next item as an example. So we believe that over the course of the 10 years, over the course of the 6 years, the 10% would be adequate.
But we're paying interest on the money we'll be spending in the 6th year, which we don't even know what the money is, it'll probably be more.
Right, but we will,
For 5 years, we're paying interest on that money in the 6th year.
it won't be split, I guarantee you, it won't be split equally amongst 6 years. It'll be more heavily
Which was your
spent.
assumption you said earlier.
Yeah,
Well, I don't know, it's.
it'll be,
not gonna be
it'll
regular.
be more heavily spent in the first 3 years. There's no question about that.
Because of the essential needs.
Because of the essential needs, because this is we're at we were at the tail end of our last 6-year plan
A year ago.
in 23. And so I can assure you that a hunk of these items, and I'm sure Doug can, the author of most of these items, can tell you that they'll be done in the first 3 years.
So you're saying it, rather than having multiple bonds at 30,000 a whack, which would add up to 180,000.
Oh, no, we don't want to do that, as he said.
But we're paying $250,000 in interest. So wouldn't it be cheaper to do it in blocks?
But the other thing that we're able to do, when we issue bonds, let's say we go with January, we're not gonna be spending all of that money. I mean, that money is going to earn interest. We will be making
Right,
money on that.
So
exactly.
we'll be investing
We'll only
anything
be
that's,
So-
pulling down, we've got the authorization, we'll only be pulling down what we're actually gonna use, the rest of it. we said.
Well,
So
we'll
you're gonna,
invest.
are you gonna encumber all the money in the first or second year of this thing? So in other words, you're gonna get the bonds,
Well-
bids will be done
The
at the
way that,
beginning?
the way that this works is, because it's fund accounting, this will all be in not necessarily a separate bank account, but what it would be, it'll be in a separate fund, and it's called the Capital Projects Fund, so it's all there. We start making bond payments and interest payments, of course, during that 6 years. But that money's gonna be in an account, and it will be earning interest as well.
Yeah, but the thing is, I think what Glenn is talking about here is that you're gonna be paying 3%, 3.1%, and you're probably only gonna be making 2% interest on the account. So there's gonna be a gap there of 1% that we're gonna be paying out and getting nothing for it. But what I'm asking is that when you look at all of these projects, when are you going to go out for bids on all of these projects? Are you gonna be going out for bids on some of these projects 5 years out?
no.
Are you gonna be doing all of the bids 2 years out?
I think it's more likely to have the vast majority of this money spent in the first 3 years.
Okay, so in other words, you're gonna encumber all that money right away, you're gonna lock in those prices in the
No,
first year.
no, they're not, because most of the bids they get are good for 30 days.
That,
That's
in
correct.
some cases, that's
Right,
true.
so you
That's
can't
been my
say we're gonna do it in 3 years, but bonding, when you bond money, there's really strict specifications
Right.
by law that you can do with that money. You
Mhm.
can't take a bond for a building and then fix roads unless you've got a
Right.
bond for roads.
Right.
If, for example, if you bond $1 million for roads, you spend 800,000, you get 200,000 less. You can't use that for operating expenses. You can use it for a bond.
It's all,
It's all, the law really regulates
Right,
what you
But
can do.
what I'm saying is that when you put out a bid and you accept a contract and you sign a contract, it may not be work that's done this year, it may be work that's done 12 months from that time, but you've locked in the price.
Or it might take you 12 months to get the work done.
But the
As an
difference, the
example.
difference is, when we bond this money, we're trusting that it's gonna get done what's supposed to be done.
No, you don't have to trust that. We'll report to the executive committee every quarter.
Yeah, well, for example, the last, and this was handy, this is what Glenn was talking about, where you've got it every year, you kind of,
Yeah,
a better idea to see it. I don't know how hard that would be, but.
well, that's what
Planned that way,
actually,
it happened that way.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
happened. That is,
Yeah.
wasn't there.
forecasting in the future is a.
Yeah, but the-
But if it's all gonna be done, or most of it's gonna be done in the first 3 years,
Yeah.
why do we have a 6-year plan?
But the point
Why don't we
that-
have 2 3-year plans or something?
The point I'm gonna get at with that is on the one that shows Strafford County Capital Improvement Plan project updates. The courtyard with the glass roof is the big one.
You remember that one?
I wasn't here for that.
You made the motion.
I wasn't here for that.
One second. What I'm saying is you made the motion to transfer that 700 something thousand into the radio purchase. You were at the executive committee. You made the motion.
I did. I
Yeah.
thought that was a grant we got for the 700.
We got a matching grant for that.
Okay,
So we got both.
so that's what this.
So
this
what
was
happened, if
transferred.
you remember Representative Newton, for whatever reason, I have this memory that never quits when it comes to this stuff. We were gonna lose the pricing from Motorola. We knew we had the grant coming. It was a, congressional direct grant from
I
Congress.
remember that, yeah, I remember that.
But we were gonna lose the price on the Motorola project because we only had till January first. We weren't gonna get the grant by then. It's a COPS grant. And I mean, that's what they refer to it as. So we, asked you to take whatever that $700,000.
Well, it was actually 900,
Right, that was the total amount, but we spent some of that for the. actual
86,000 you spent to
Yeah.
try to do it, yeah.
So we asked you to take 700 and change and put it towards that radio project. And with the idea that locking in the price saved us several $100,000. And simultaneous with that, we were getting the $750,000, it wasn't exactly matching, but close to matching from the COPS grant. All of which, and we just finished the radio project
This time last year.
this time last year. Actually, if you really want to be technical, we just finished the radio project last week. We, the actual working of the radio, okay, was last year, but we just finished the cleanup last week. I think we just finished the
So
site.
that just shows,
site
that
remediation.
just shows an example of
Which day it was?
what the money had to be used for, and it couldn't just be used for anything. It
That's
had
the
to be-
point I was trying to make.
Yeah.
It has to be with the permission of the executive committee.
So to follow up with this sheet, which again, this is after the fact, this is what was spent each year. We'll have that going forward, right? We'll get each year and we'll probably see what Ray said, which is a lot of it spent the first 3 years.
Yeah.
But we'll have actual numbers once we get going.
Yeah.
But you can't really do precise numbers like this estimating.
No, I
You'll see by the-
understand that.
You'll see it by the quarter, you know,
Yeah.
the executive.
And then you'll
committee
put
will
it
see
together into the year.
And then we'll put it, so what we'll do is show per quarter and then a total
Go ahead, Bill.
and just move forward.
In regards to the scheduling and, the length of this term being 6 years, I think a good example would be if you look at the Riverside Rest Home, there's items in there like replacement of washing machines, replacement of the tub room floor and the sewers. Though, just those 3 items there would have to be done in order. I have to fix the sewers first before I add washing machines. I have to do the, the washing room floor before I put the new machines in. So this is all based on the availability of the vendors, availability of the equipment. There's gonna be lead times on building washing machines. So I don't think there's any way that we could get all this done, within anything shorter than 6 years. And honestly, there's some things that we might be able to pick at with our building repair budgets, depending on where that ends up at the end of the year. All the repairs that we're making now are having a positive impact on our annual building repair budgets. We're seeing less failures, we're seeing less surprises, and we're getting ahead of this stuff. So it's good that we have that available there, and I'd like to utilize as much of that as I can to kind of take it off of the plate of this.
Well, I mean,
This year.
an example, we were talking about repaving Riverside's parking lots.
Right.
Yesterday, poor Doug was out there, or no, it's the day before yesterday.
Yeah.
Day before yesterday, Doug was out there at 5 o'clock when I was leaving, sealing the last of the parking
Yeah.
lot before we painted the stripes. With the hot sealer stuff that we have filling in the cracks. So we could save the paving, as an example. Plus, it didn't make much sense to pave that. We don't have, if we were ever to get a new nursing home, we would, it would be no sense in repaving those parking lots. So we don't even know what we'd be thinking about doing with that.
I'm a big believer in prevention rather than replacement.
It just seems it's a little bit of magical thinking that some of these prices are gonna be anything like this in 6 years.
Well, we hope that what might be under in one will cover the overage in the other. And that pretty well worked out in the last 6-year project.
Can you say presto for me?
Well,
That's the magical lane,
I-
yeah.
All we can do, sir, is the best is to estimate it as best you can.
But if the prices are good the first couple of years, then maybe they're 2% or whatever, they're nowhere near the 10%. By year 6, you're gonna have saved enough for a 20% increase, because you didn't use the 10% in the first few years.
That's our hope, honestly speaking, and the other hope is.
Because 10% is the average. So again, anything they buy in the next couple of years.
What,
yeah,
what
way I
does
see
the
it.
county have for a contingency fund now? And how much is in it?
A contingency fund?
We have no contingency.
You
fund.
have no set, it's the unassigned fund balance, is
We have
what you got
unassigned
that
fund balance.
resembles,
Yeah, that's
no
not
contingency.
contingency though.
We call it unassigned fund balance.
Yeah.
But it's not actually, you have no actual contingency fund for
No.
emergencies.
No, when you did the previous bond, did you build in 10% then too? Or
No.
less?
No,
You didn't.
no.
And now, and we learned that to be a mistake.
Oh, okay, that's. what
Well,
I
that's,
wanted to connect
it's
it.
also $1,004,000, you know,
Yeah.
that's a pretty substantial
Yes,
contingency
sir, it
in
is.
anybody's mind, but.
We
The
learned that-
unassigned fund balance, where is that at this point? And just a ballpark estimate,
No,
She can give you the exact number.
because I do think that, don't other counties have an actual contingency fund?
Not that I'm aware of.
On individual projects, you'd have contingency, but
But that
Government has a
contingency is
fund
supposed to be for emergencies. It's
We have,
supposed to be
right
money for
now,
emergencies.
in your operating budget, we have a $5,000 contingency.
Yeah,
Which the only purpose of that is to keep a line item open so that if we had a crisis that we couldn't fund, we'd go to the executive committee and say, can you transfer money from here into the contingency? And let me give you an example, Representative Newton, that happened on your watch. When we had the flooding in the front of the courthouse that flooded into the community corrections area, we had the insurance pay for the cost of the damage. However, the remediation, we had to pay for ourselves. And we asked the executive committee to transfer money. In this case, it was out of excess revenue. We asked you to transfer it out of excess revenue to put it into contingency so we could pay the bill for the flood. That's an example of what you're talking about.
so our unassigned fund balance as of the end of 2023 is 2,506,000 and change.
And can I ask, is that title part of budgeting and these format sheets and everything? It isn't really something you guys chose, isn't it? Isn't that?
It's a result of cumulative operations.
Yes.
So that's
They-
where,
so they-
that's
so they-
where we stand as of
So
December
an
30.
but I mean, so an auditor recognizes that name because of the.
Yeah, this is coming from our audited.
Yes, that's
financial
what I thought. So it's not
Yes.
something we kind of designed. That's
No.
what it's in budget.
It's a result
Unassigned,
of,
yeah.
it's a result of everything coming
Well, because the
together.
title's a little confusing, but I guess I'm trying to say, we
Well,
didn't make up the title.
We have items that are assigned, we have, but we have obligations for that, but there are different types of fund, but this is unassigned, it's not assigned to anything.
so the final question. The ban you took out was taken out December 7th, yet 1,300,000 to 1,900,000 was paid out to Warren Street. Was that money taken out of the unassigned fund balance and then reimbursed when the ban came back? How did you pay that at least 1,300,000 to Warren Street?
We did abandon.
We issued.
You did a ban in December, but
Right.
you paid them before, by the end of October, you had paid them 1,300,000.
Mhm.
And did that money come out of the unassigned fund balance that you reimbursed once you got the ban? How did
It
you,
really, it came out of our cash flow.
You remember that there's times in the year in which when we borrow money, as an example, in January, we borrow 20-something million dollars.
so a TAN, you
We do a TAN,
did
right?
a TAN, yeah.
And in that case, we paid them out of the cash flow and then reimbursed the cash flow
Oh,
At the point when we were at $1.3 million, we had that cash flow in October, but then, well, you know, and then come December, we had to issue the bond anticipation note because we needed that cash flow for December's expenses, of course. And so, as you know, because we just sent you another accounting, there was another invoice for $533,000 at the end of the project or whatever you want to call it. And at that point, you know, we could not absorb that, so we issued.
I thought it was interesting meeting with the DRA yesterday that in researching the county taxes, I could see where by December 17th, the taxes had to be paid, or there's a 10% interest per day that cities and towns don't pay it. But I said, well, where is the June one? And
We
then
don't-
talking with the DRA, you guys will get paid once a year in December.
That's why we have. to
So the
issue
cities and
payments.
towns, I don't think we all know this in this room, the cities and towns collect the county portion of the tax rate twice a year, but they keep the money and the county doesn't get it until December 17th.
That's exactly.
Most of us know that.
That's how we
Well,
live.
I didn't know that.
I'm not faulting you, it's just
Yeah.
those of us who've been at this steadily right along.
That's why I do TANs.
Might one suppose they're
Yeah.
We
doing
know that the
a
cities
similar
sit on
thing
that money.
there, that the money that they do not yet have to pay is at interest.
Well, the other part of this is, the other part of
They're
this
playing the
is,
same game.
we might be in a situation where not so much the cities, but some of the towns depend on that June collection for their continued operation till December. So that would mean that if we collected in June, several of the towns might need to do their own TAN,
It might help us, but it wouldn't, it might help the county, but.
but it
wouldn't
might
help
hurt them.
the town.
First of all, they won't have necessarily the borrowing power.
Yeah, I don't think most of the people know
Probably.
Well, in a roundabout way, it's brought up, regularly by the representative from Farmington, who, you know, encourages us to, change our fiscal year and we explain to him about the borrowing and that kind of stuff and that seems to, appease him, or explain the situation. But yeah, that's always been that way for the whole 38 years I've been here.
that. Yeah.
And I don't know, there's no county that collects twice a year. I mean, it's not just us, none of the 10 counties collect twice a year. They
In
only
my,
collect that once.
my previous life, working for a town and being on the town side, I think always saw it as, you know, the tax collection side, it's an expensive proposition for sending out the tax bills, the tax collection. There's a substantial cost with doing that. For us, the tax collection, I mean, we issue an invoice to each of the communities and so we don't incur any expense for tax collection. The cities and towns do. So it's sort of like a balancing act, isn't it?
And plus our payment is pretty well guaranteed,
Yeah,
where your cities and town payment is not guaranteed.
Yeah.
Because somebody might not pay their
Right,
taxes.
yeah.
That's exactly right.
So I think that's kind of a quid pro quo.
Well, I think the 10% a day kind of encourages the cities and towns to pay the county when they're supposed
we
to.
never had a late payment.
Right, that's what I understand that too.
Did you say that you have?
Yeah, okay. We've sometimes accepted a check and held it.
Yeah.
For a few
Yeah.
days until there was one particular community in Strafford County that seemed, there was some problem with setting the school tax
Yeah.
rate. It was in the northern part of the county. And, but we
Bless
didn't
you.
want to be two things. We didn't want to charge them interest. That's just not a good neighborly thing to do. Second thing is the interest is exorbitant, as you just mentioned. And the third thing is, we would then have to report to people we borrow from that our tax collection was late. So it impacts us too. So we might have accepted their check and forgot to deposit it for a couple of days. Until they then called us and said, okay, the money's in the bank, you can deposit it. And that only has happened once or twice in my 38 years. It just so happened it happened in the last couple of years.
So long ago, someone thought this was the fairest way to do it.
Right, and it
as
has
we
not
keep talking,
changed.
It sounds like probably the least of evils or whatever, to give the towns a little
And
more.
it kind of has a mutual benefit to the same people, whether they're wearing their county hat or their town hat.
But it's
Like
good to
us.
understand it.
But you ought to know about it anyway.
And that's why we're always borrowing hands. I see that.
I can see if there are more questions or if you need anything more from us, just a vote.
I don't have anything more to present to you. Certainly when, I know Janet has big packages of all the backup for everything, which we will be, I think you have, or.
You got something?
Yeah,
Yeah, this committee has got them in the mail.
yeah, I think everybody got it.
Well, I had this stuff sent out to by mail to some of the committees because they needed the stuff to review beforehand, not just say, come in and try to do it all on
You're
the
just throwing
fly.
money away,
Right,
$11 to have that shipped.
Yeah, but
Yeah, on the other hand,
you wanna do it.
I've got it with me.
You wanna do it 5 minutes before you're voting on something? No.
especially like
Well, we've done
Riverside,
that in the past.
well, and you've chided us for it. So we don't want to repeat our mistake.
That's why I had it sent by mail, but if you got stuff here that doesn't have to be sent by mail, then I will give it to you on the way.
So if I could make a statement before we vote. The concerns that I have and the concerns other people I know have is the contingency amount. And it seems like there's quite a bit in the unassigned fund balance that would cover that anyway. I feel comfortable with the questions that I've asked and the answers you've given me. As far as bonding, and especially if you can, trust but verify, you're gonna show me a bond agreement where you were able to renegotiate or pay it off, cause I look for that when I buy something. I gotta give you an example. Bonnie and I bought a new car. And we just paid cash for it. We got it, and that the last thing they wanted us to sign was Toyota. They wanted us to sign a paper saying if we sold the car within a year, we had to sell it back to Toyota.
Hmm.
And I just said, I'm not signing that, and I don't even think it's legal for you to make us do it.
Right.
And we didn't sign it, so I feel comfortable in the sense that you are in charge of what's gonna happen here with the bonding. As far as it being used for other things, the bond bank limits to what it can be used for,
Did you
and,
say that anything like that would have to be approved by the delegation?
Executive.
yeah, and it's gonna be approved by the laws of bonding too. 'Cause
You're right.
you've got
Well,
to
yeah.
stay, they're pretty
Has to
strict.
be- has to
I'm
be.
I'm not happy with the fact it's not broken out by year.
Yeah, which we should get.
The
We'll do the-
prior one is just kind of happenstance.
Yeah.
I think it's a little artificial to call it a plan when it's just a plan to spend a pile of money over 6 years.
Yeah, and I think
I'd
that,
like to know what the plan is.
and I think that operational should be taken out of this.
Yes.
Because I think it should strictly be bonding and,
Just a point of clarification, some of the things that I've asked for at the Department of Corrections. I've asked for new dryers, I've asked for a new dishwasher. I would love to tell you that I'm gonna do the new dryer on this year and a new dishwasher on this year. But I think it would be more prudent for me to be able to make the decision after consultation with the maintenance department to say, you know what, don't do the dryers this year because they're fit, form, and functional at this time, but the dishwasher is perhaps the thing that we should do this time. And that's one of the reasons why we've listed them in what we perceive as what the priorities are, but they're not necessarily etched in stone that I need to do this and this year and then this and this year. That's the only thing that, from my operational perspective, is having a little, like, identifying some of the things that we think that we're going to need to replace, because I've been operating that facility for 20 years now. And these are coming to the end of their useful life. We, through preventative maintenance and through utilizing the equipment in the best possible way, we've been able to extend that longevity of those pieces of equipment. But in the event that,
Flexibility.
I anticipate to get, to put in new industrial dryers that dry clothes for the entire county, if those are still functioning the way that they're supposed to, and my Hobart dishwasher starts to go on the fritz, I'd like to be able to exercise the ability to do the dishwasher prior to the dryer. That's the only reason
Well,
why.
moving back to what he was saying, you have a $2 million contingency fund for emergencies.
No.
So if
Well,
you're-
No, we do
that's
not.
unassigned fund balance.
It's unassigned
But
fund.
could it be used, an unassigned fund balance can be used for emergencies. That was the whole intent of
So
having an
then if
unassigned
the
fund balance.
timeline isn't right and you anticipate in the 6th year, you're gonna get this other money, then you could use your contingency money.
Well, no,
I have a question on this as well. I mean, if we do not put the contingency in this budget, and we end up using fund balance to pay for something that a cost may go up, or something that we didn't anticipate within the thing, that means we'll be using our unanticipated fund balance or undesignated fund balance for this expenditures. How will that affect our bond rating?
It will have a negative impact
effect
on it.
no,
Which means we'll pay a higher interest rate on future loans. I mean, or would it impact if we took the contingency out of this? Would bond counsel take a look at it and say, you haven't planned for a contingency for increase, for costs down the road? How are you gonna pay for that? We're not sure that you're gonna get the best rate. But that,
No,
is that a
and-
possibility?
That could be a question of potential investors in our
no,
bonds.
but here's something to consider. What does the state do? What does the governor and executive council do when they put out an amount they're gonna give for project? The project goes out and it comes in way over the amount they gave. They don't say, well, here's more. They say, you know what? You go back to the drawing board and you come up, instead of a full loaf of bread, maybe you can only get 3/4 of a loaf. And we do what we can with the money we've got. Now, I did
They have contingencies.
for the city of Rochester, for the state of New Hampshire, Public Works did the 10-year, the master plan, we did the capital improvements plan. And we had IT come, and I know IT, I know the expenses. This guy, 30 million he wanted, 33 million, but what he finished by saying was, I will make whatever you give me work. And I would ask you that, whatever we give you, will you make it work?
I'm gonna have to.
Okay, so we need to remember that too. This is the wish of all the things they want.
This,
But in the end result is what we give them. I have confidence that you guys will do the best that you can to make it work.
but that isn't by any means a wish list.
No, this is.
Well, that's what
These
I
are,
called it that. I'm considering some of the things, you can say they're not. I can say they are, because some of these things you need to replace, maybe you'll get another 5 years out of them. Maybe you'll get another 6 years. But that's what I called it.
And the real dilemma is if we end up in year 4 or year 5. And it's an item that has been removed that's of some substance, it means you're gonna have to reissue another bond for it.
Yeah. If worse comes to worse.
Right, and remember, if there is leftover money in this project. Say the 6 years goes by and everything's done and.
Like the 900,000 that was left over from the
Right,
last,
right.
which we have 4.1 million, that was almost 1 million.
I understand, but we decided we couldn't do the project, so we reported that to the executive committee.
So it was a project we didn't do because we couldn't do it.
Well, exactly,
It
well,
wasn't that
no,
we-
because it was way much more.
Yeah,
money.
it was, yeah, it
and
just was a
wasn't a
bad
savings
plan,
within
so-
projects that we had.
No.
a
What was
project
it?
that
What
just
was it? Was it the steel that,
Asbestos.
yeah, cause I talked to somebody else who said, no, it was the price of the steel. I said, I don't think so. I
No.
think it was the asbestos they were
It's
gonna
the
have to get into.
Every other block was,
Hmm.
every other block in the whole thing was full of asbestos. So we stopped because we were gonna have to remediate that asbestos. The only other thing, I just wanna say this one more thing. If there is leftover money in this, when it's all done, and all these projects are done, by state finance law, there's only 2 things that can be done with that leftover money. And it has to be approved by the delegation.
Right,
And that is that you can substitute a project of equal length to the bond. The second thing is it can be used to make a bond payment. Those are the only 2
so you
options.
can zero it out at the end anyway,
That's right,
Why
but,
not?
but with.
which you
permission
did
of
with
the-
the last. one.
With permission of the delegation.
We have a hand down there.
Go ahead, Doug.
Sure, if you take a look at the list I believe item for item, the items that I have listed as high priority, I'm either mandated or they're to do with life safety. So currently, right now, the lead time on some of our air conditioner units that are being replaced at the jail are 18 months.
Yeah.
I pick up the phone and call Train, it's 18 months until they can provide me with a coil, basically, or a radiator or something like that. The lead times are becoming obnoxious
Yeah.
right now.
Well, the life safety that was passed by the House of Representatives
Mhm.
to adopt those new codes that they were warned
That's-
repeatedly not to do.
That's a problem.
But I think this time we didn't go with the new ones. We didn't renew them this time, but
Uh,
that created a
2018.
tremendous
2018.
cost to everybody.
Sure.
I mean, big time
Sure,
cost.
so if we're planning on using unassigned fund balance, and this is out of my wheelhouse, I apologize, but it occurred to me that if we're planning on using an unassigned fund balance as a rainy day fund, when that unit breaks, I still have 18 months. It doesn't matter whether I have money in my pocket that I asked for at this time, or whether I'm counting on money
But
that I
what
have
I'm
set
saying,
aside.
what I'm saying is that if we need a contingency, and there could also be things that that's what the state does. If the project, I think the General Sullivan Bridge is the one that comes to mind.
Mhm.
The state approved so much money to have it done and the bids came back crazy, so they didn't do anything. That's something that, you know, the county in good sense should keep in the back of their mind. If that comes to that, what is plan B here? You know, I look around the county and I think you guys have done an outstanding job keeping the stuff, the condition it's at.
Thank you.
I don't know what you decided to do with the windows, but I thought I read with Granite State Glass, you checked with them to maybe do some things. I'm more comfortable with that because some of that stuff is so specialized unless you hired somebody that was no longer working at a glass company that knew it and did it. I wouldn't feel comfortable with anybody but them doing it because it's pretty critical to do that stuff and do it so it lasts and it's good and it's done right.
Sure.
So I saw that when I went reviewing it, and I felt better doing that.
That was
One
on
of the
your suggestion.
concerns I do have, and it's just a minor one, is the initial estimate to fix the sewer system was 90,000, now it's 300,000. So that's 3 times what it was. I thought 90,000 and Ray might remember at the commissioner meeting, I said, I don't think that's enough money. And George said the same thing, because I'm still not convinced you know what you're gonna get into when you get doing that, because supposedly there's no plans for the nursing home when it was built. There's no plans here. Nobody can look at the plans and see what was there and what was done, and
Yeah, yeah.
I find that just blows my mind,
There
because
was
the
no
building's
plan,
50
no
years
plans
old.
for the sewer.
Yeah, when it was constructed, I don't believe as-built for sewer was a common thing to get a set of
Yeah,
prints
but
on.
didn't you have your own sewer at the time, the city, or
We
the,
had our own sewer.
Yeah, you weren't into the city
until
system.
1990.
yeah,
In
so, yeah.
1990,
so
we
that's
was
when
down
you
back.
did it, yeah.
we
It's
tied in
down
with
back in the
Bill.
wood pile.
Yeah, but my concern is not, if it's only a 3-inch pipe that's there, don't even, that is not. I'm surprised you don't have trouble every day with it, because that is not,
I do.
yeah, that's not even adequate, you know.
It's now.
Any room, any house that has more than 2 or 3 bathrooms, it's 4 inches.
Sure.
And you got 54, right, over there, plus kitchen, you know,
Yeah.
it's amazing, I don't know what you're gonna run into when you dig it up, but there's ways to go around it to get your secondary system until, for whatever you find, you'll be able to do it.
Sure,
There are
but-
ways to do that. I'm
Yeah.
hoping that's what you'll do.
Yeah, well, it's just on the bid
That stuff
process
needs
get
to
the
be
best
done,
we can.
because I think the conservation easement, one of the stipulations is you don't put anything in the water or in the ground around the easement, and those are the easements on the county has 287 acres?
Yeah, 200, I think it's 247 acres in the easement.
Well, there's, 212, I thought it was in the easement, but anyway, the only stuff that isn't in conservation easement is what's around all these buildings.
Yeah,
Basically.
and areas, an
And
area
across the
across the
road.
street,
Yeah,
and an area down the end.
yeah, and it's the easement is specific, you do not put anything that's gonna get into the water system, because of the watershed. That was the importance, was that one of the importance, Ray? You weren't here when they did that.
I was.
We
when
were,
they did
2002.
Yeah, it was right, not long after I started.
Yeah.
I just
2000.
finished my 38th
Yeah,
year,
yeah.
last.
So the reason
weeks.
that and congratulations on that. So the reason they did that, some of it with the easement was because of the watershed issue. So, I don't know if you guys got in trouble with them, hopefully you're not, because you're not supposed to be doing.
No,
if that's something
come
like
out, they
that.
come out and inspect every year.
They do.
We have, yeah, we're on a 7th year of our MS4 permit right now, and that's
Yeah.
handled by Verdantis. They're the company that does the legal stuff for us with
But
that.
it was, you know, so that was one of the concerns I got, and I understand, like Glenn has said, we've all been through inflation, we know what stuff costs now compared to what it was 1 or 2 years
Sticker
ago,
shock, yeah.
and it's difficult. I think there's a trend where it's starting to moderate some and go back to some, but there's still the help issue is, you know, I'm hearing from everybody, we cannot get the help we need. There's places that have to close at night because they can't get the help to run the businesses that usually, you know, like, it's everywhere. See, I think it's getting a little better, but it's, you know, the nursing industry is, it's just what they're paying nurses. I was talking to a guy yesterday, and if a nurse has to travel more than 50 or 60 miles per job as a traveling nurse, and you probably know it better than anybody, they're paying a traveling nurse, this one nurse, $4,800 a month just for a place to stay.
Yeah.
4,800 a month.
It's crazy.
Yeah, Rockingham paid, I thought it was 10.5 million, it was closer to 12 million.
Yeah, it's just, so
Last
those,
year in traveling.
those numbers are just
Traveling nurses.
absolutely crazy, and what you've gotta, you know, in reading the starting, and I think it's a good thing, Ray, it's starting to come out. There was a great article by NPR about the, dementia patients that are, what's the best term, they're just violent. And what they had, the problem, this scaring the crap out of people, and the people have to be so well trained to deal with that.
Yeah.
And then what do you do? Because now you've got them and they're hurting people. They gave a specific example of one person that pushed another one down. The guy was dead in 4 days.
Yeah.
And then the guy, it seems like, you know, there's just everybody, unless you know how to handle a person like that, that's gotta be scary. And you have to, I'm not saying that, it wasn't that particular one, but I realize you're dealing with that crap every day.
Every day.
And it's just the help you've gotta get, you can't get help to work at burger places or pizza joint. Now imagine what Mr. Bauer and others have to deal with the 24/7 people that are like that. And it's, you know, that, it was an NPR article, and if you wanted to, if you guys wanted to research it and read it,
You didn't see me on Channel 9?
I saw you guys on Channel 9.
Yeah, I did a Fred Coker thing on Channel 9.
I said, what
Remember, the TV camera adds 30 pounds. That's all I gotta.
I just,
I'm actually 30 pounds thinner.
I
than
saw
was
it, and
on
I thought,
Channel
what a
9.
bunch of crap,
It's
what a bunch of crap.
pounds, you said.
But
No,
why,
it's 30 pounds.
I just have a quick 10% question again. I think I've got it. Let's say we do the 10%, which is fine with me. The two kind of, well, one worst case is that it's wrong and we have to do a bond again anyway, that the 10% just wasn't enough. When we get to say year 5 or whatever. But the other is, basically, if there's excess, we just pay the bond off early. Is it that simple?
That's one of the two
So
options.
There are options.
But that's not a negative.
No, I don't see it as a negative. It's one of
So
the.
I'm still having a hard time seeing the negative of building in for over 6 years at 10%. Because a couple of people don't think that's enough. So I don't think it makes sense to make it 0. I also don't like the idea of mixing it with other funds. That then will, you know, take his dishwasher out of something
Well,
else or whatever.
I can't speak for most, I can't speak for anybody,
Well, that's
but
probably
I think
just
the
my
10% might not fly when it comes time for bonding, and I'm hoping that there will be some kind of negotiations or discussion before that time comes.
Well, we're gonna have to go before the executive committee in the first place.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean voting? I mean, the bond people are happy with the 10%.
They've seen our
Yeah.
a draft of our.
But you
CA.
Well, of course they are,
He's
yeah, it's an
talking
extra
about getting-
10%
You
for
mean the
them, right?
delegation?
It's an extra $1.4 million.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
Extra $1.4 million. You know, the other thing that's concerning is the last time, 7 years ago, we bonded 4.1%, now we're bonding 4 times that. In 7 years, and that's a pretty substantial increase, but what we can't lose sight of is the fact that the amount that the county could bond and not get in trouble and what we bond now, what we're looking to bond is a pretty substantial difference. Would you say 7% around that or greater, you get in trouble? But you're talking, we're only gonna be at like 1%
We're
here.
not even at 1%.
But that's what we would be at is one, so that, I think that's a very good, that's a very positive.
Yeah.
Cause I know at the state level, our treasurer said, yeah, right around 7%, and the thing we had was. We had put in cash together, it was 50 or 60 million cash to do the engineering for the new jail. So the House passed the cash, it went to the Senate took the cash out for something else. So then they put in a bill to bond that 50 million that we had already given in cash to do the engineering. So that was the discussion we had at Public Works on the capital improvements. And the treasurer, who I think, like you, I think you do a great job, she does a good job. And I trusted everything she said, yeah, and she said that with the state, if we stayed around 7%, and then we were close to that, the 50 million we would have had to bond, she was talking 5% for the rate. For the 50%, 50 million we would have bonded, we would have still been in that, not over the threshold where now we're gonna have issues with losing bond rating and stuff, but we were getting close to maxing out. So you're at 1% with this, and what would you say would be the max out for the county with bonding?
Well,
Would it be more than 7% or?
our limit is 360 million. I mean,
Yeah.
I couldn't ever imagine being anywhere close to
Yeah.
that, even,
But even if we go to that limit, we'd be looking at, there'd be serious bond repercussions and everything at that point.
yeah, well, that's something that when we go out for bonds, they look at our debt limit, that, there's a whole disclosure.
Do you
And that's.
Do
part
you
of it.
have a number where if we got to that level, they'd say, uh-oh, this is not gonna be good? I don't think you anywhere near that now.
No, but we can, that's a good point, but we can inquire from our, I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be,
When you have bond counsel and a financial advisor, you're paying them to help you with a particular offering. So for us to call them and ask your exact
Yeah,
question,
I
we're
got it.
happy to do that.
But they
Yeah.
also take a look at life expectancy of projects you're
Of
bonding.
course,
So in
yeah,
other words,
we've
if you're
said-
taking a look at a 5-year, 10-year, 20-year, or a 50-year longevity on a project, that's considered.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
When they take a look at stuff like that.
well, that's what we should be bonding. I
Yeah.
think you guys bonded
You know,
roads
we-
one time, and I
we
didn't
wouldn't
think
be
that
able-
idea at all.
I mean, if you get a project that it's a large project, but it's got a 50-year lifespan, that has a much, they look at that significantly different than they look at a 5-year
Yeah.
project that's got a large bill on it.
So for like the projects that we're looking at, we could never issue 25, 30-year bonds for this. You
Would
can't,
make sense.
no, well,
Yeah.
and our financial advisor would advise against it.
And our bond counsel.
And I don't think any investor would look at it because the useful life of the assets, you're not supposed to bond beyond the useful life.
Well, anything
there's an
that's less than 5 years, you can't really bond on anyway, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
But anything more than 5 years,
Yeah.
you can bond for. And it's just a matter of how long, and it's what the bond council will take a look at, is what's the life expectancy on the project? Is this going to outlast the bond?
Yeah,
And if it is, I mean, if it's not gonna outlast the bond, then people, they don't like that.
yeah, nobody's gonna invest in it first. of all.
Representative
And we've got a good mix here.
Yeah,
just from my notes. So with this proposal, we stay at the 1%, which is excellent. But I'm not sure what the risk is of keeping the 10% in this.
Well, the risk is we're bonding another 1.4 million. That's the obvious risk. We're adding, because it's 14 million, it's over 16 million with the 10%, the
But
contingency.
what is the risk of that if, again, the two things I asked before, I mean, if it isn't enough, we might have to bond again, so that would be negative.
But
If it is enough, we can pay off the bond sooner.
the other thing, Chris,
Could I wait, though, let him answer that so I can have
Yeah,
it for my.
well, I'm gonna answer it the way a conservative would answer it, and the philosophies are different.
Yeah,
Is that if I go, let's say I go to get a roof done, which I did. And I have people come tell me, well, geez, it's 25,000 to have the roof done. Okay. So I say, well, that's more than I wanted to spend, but if that's what it's gonna cost, is what it costs. So then I look around a little more. And I find quality to a degree, they knew what they were doing, roofers, but they required some babysitting. I saved $8,000 by having the roofers come in that did babysit, $8,000 in my pocket. That's very substantial for somebody that lives
But
on the
with
fixed
this
income.
bond.
So
we
what
can
I'm,
pick up
let me
the road.
finish. Well, what that entailed was babysitting and people on my roof for 3 weeks instead of 3 days. And I'm hoping that this group will be open-minded enough to say, you know, there may be a little babysitting involved, there may be something we have to give a little, but if we can save a substantial amount to do it, and you know it'll get done, it's worth it, but I'll share with you, by the end of 3 weeks, I was sick of people on my roof, and I was sick of people banging, but you know, when it was done, the winter we had, the roof didn't leak, the roof looks great, it looks great now, and they were honest, they were good. And you probably deal with some people like that too, you say, these guys are,
Yeah.
man, they're
Many
just, you know,
quality
they're a little dysfunctional, but they did the job, they did the quality job, and I saved a substantial amount. So as a conservative, if we don't have to add another $1.4 million to bond, because that's gonna cost to add that $1.4 million. It's gonna be 3% of the $1.4 million to have that. Do we need it? And if we have it, will people think, well, geez, we know they got a contingency, so we can just maybe pad that bill a little.
But won't they have to come back to the committee if they make a change like that? I mean, I
Not
thought
if the
that was the
contingency's
secret.
in there.
Well, I think the thing is he's saying, he's got a Hobart dishwasher. What you're saying is if he can buy an Amana at a lower price, which is certainly not gonna give him the lifespan that a Hobart is giving him, but he can get it cheaper. He
Yeah.
can save money. So you're saying buy the Amana. That makes no sense whatsoever. You're buying an Amana, which may give him 5 years. He's got a Hobart, which will give him 15 years.
Yeah, but
Why
maybe,
buy the Amana?
but maybe what I'm saying, Chuck, is maybe if there's 5 of them they wanna buy, and I'm not saying there is, pick an item. And instead of buying 5, they get 3 this time.
But they're
And
gonna
they
need,
keep 2 of the old ones, so if the 3 can't do it or something happens, they've still got a couple of the old ones they can use. I'm saying maybe that if there was not that contingency, then maybe there would be the incentive to try to do that.
but I'm looking at it from a perspective, and this is one thing that if we need 5 laundry units. And the ones we've got we've had them for more than 15 years. And they've got to be replaced because maintenance on them is getting too expensive. We replace the 5 of them. I mean, if we've got one that works, you may not have to replace it that year, but you never know, you may have to replace it the next year. And I'm hearing discussions that, you know, inflation hasn't come down to 0%. We're still at about just over 3% inflation right now. So the thing is that if I put no contingency in here, I'm not planning for any, I'm saying we're gonna do this and there's gonna be no inflation for the next 5 years. And, you know, that's not reality.
Yeah.
You know, we've gotta have money in here to anticipate for inflation. And I
Okay,
don't want them to buy inferior equipment because it will save us money in the short
we're
term.
getting into philosophical
I
differences
actually-
here, and I agree with that. I
I think we
agree with
have two
everything you
different
say, but
philosophies.
my mind doesn't think that way.
Yeah.
But we didn't have a contingency in the last 7 years, and the county didn't dry up and blow away either. So, you know, we didn't have it last time, and now we need it this time.
Well, I think, again, they're different
But
philosophies.
not-
Yeah, it is. It's a different, you know, we just have different philosophies. I accept yours. You know, and
Well,
I see where you're coming from and
But I do
try to accept
understand
mine
yours
and see
better
where
now
I'm
that
coming
you.
from.
We were also working at a very low interest, very low inflation rate 7 years ago.
Well, don't blame
Which we
that
don't
on
have
me.
now. No, I'm
Don't
not
blame
blaming
that
it on
on
you.
me.
Things changed after COVID. Things changed significantly because of supply and demand. You've got a guy here that's looking at these.
The 3 trillion we spent
18 months
is what
to get.
caused
Yeah,
that.
which you please wouldn't mind, but for both. of you.
Yeah.
I think we just need to focus on the task
Yeah.
here.
So I had started by making a statement and then it just went haywire before I finished, and lucky for you, I forgot where I was. And I'm not gonna start over, okay?
As the chair, I'm not
So-
gonna use my gavel.
So what I wanna say is that I do wanna stress, and you like to quote me, Ray, so I know you will, that I'm comfortable with the management and what is involved with trying to get the best deal for a bond, whatever we decide is a good way to go. And if the sole purpose of this committee is to look at the revenue and expenses and say, we think that what has been presented to us is done properly and good, with the exceptions you'd like to see,
I don't think this is a plan. It's
then
a
vote
wish
against
list.
it, but you'd like to see this. So with it, what we would tax with, according to your
It's a
memorandum,
wish list
Yeah.
in which the final years, they.
well, you don't have to argue to me,
The
just when I'm
final
done,
years
just say
will-
your
the
point.
final wishes will not be fulfilled.
Yeah.
It's
Again, I
just-
think people can use those terms however they want. I'm just looking for a vote basically on the numbers and the presentation.
Yeah,
I'm not someone that feels it has to be unanimous. It's fine with me if there are different points of view. But I think we really don't have a lot of time or energy for the
so
philosophical.
make a motion, is it time for that, is everybody?
Well, I just, before you do, but I don't really think this is a wish list. This is stuff that there's a very strong argument that that chimney has got to come down, for example, before it falls. Okay,
So I don't.
and the washing machine that doesn't get it done anymore and so forth, that stuff has to be replaced, okay? So, I hear where you're coming from with the term wish list, but I don't think it really is.
The items,
Well,
the items at the end will not be fulfilled, so I guess it's important that you put all the things you really want on the front end. Cause you're gonna run out of money before you run out of time, you know?
I think it was explained to us that they have to schedule things out because they don't have the staff to be able to manage these projects.
Yeah.
That happens at the state level all the time. You guys put funding for roads and public works, and they don't have engineers to fund to manage those projects, so they don't get done. I mean, we've got projects in Rochester which they cannot find engineers to do,
But
you know, a DOT.
then a
So-
plan would be that not all of this is gonna get done, what do we wanna get done, and what are we gonna omit?
But all of this is needed, and they're gonna do it as they can, as they're able to manage the projects, and right now, that's indeterminate. They do not know how many they can get done, or as much as they can get done, and hopefully they get all of it done. So we have.
That's a plan.
I still would like to be chair. I am concerned. I think we have covered things well. We have some good questions.
I agree.
You're gonna be forwarding us more information that's gonna go to everyone. So I'd like to make a motion that we vote to approve this presentation, which does include the 10% contingency.
I'll second.
Call the roll.
Bailey,
No,
Grassy,
Yes.
Hinton,
No,
Strafford,
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And obviously, if you have questions about what we get sent and you want to send them back to her before the exec, that's always helpful to do ahead.
I don't doubt the mechanics of all this bonding and this, and, you know, we're gonna. That's all being done well, I just don't think that this is a plan.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
I think they've got a plan here. The gentleman right here.
There's many items that have not made it to this list because of the skilled labor that we have on our maintenance crew,
Hey,
handling a lot of the stuff indoors. I think if you look at the
No,
courthouse.
Living in
sewer
the world.
pumps,